So, something I've realized on this journey is because of the religious trauma we went through in our earlier years, for those of us who attended churches, once we figured out that there was a such thing as a spiritual journey or a spiritual path, and we started seeing more people, roaming the world, like that world started opening up to us, and we started seeing it as, oh, okay, so I don't need the religious aspect of my journey anymore. And I kind of I kind of have a little bit of confliction about that because, on my journey when I started, I kind of felt the same way. I was like, okay, well, I never really felt like I was welcomed in the church because nothing that the church was speaking about um, never made sense to me. It always felt like, to me, church always felt like a business. It always felt transactional. It always felt, I tell you what to think, what to do. I tell you what God is saying. I tell you this, I tell you that, and you just follow the suit. You don't question me. You don't, And so for me, I've always had a problem with authority. And it wasn't until I started my spiritual journey that I realized why I had a problem with authority. And it was because I am my own authority. God has given me authority over my own agency. And also because I just never was one to really like take things at face value um, until I did become that person. And honestly, that correlated to every aspect of my life, not just with my relationship with God. But on this spiritual journey, I did realize that at one point in my journey, I was so mad with God, even though it was God that I called on when I was going through all of the trauma and tumultuous things that I was going through in foster care and, in other areas of my life with boys and dating and, friends and family. I was always calling on God, you know what I'm saying? But I think I didn't have the meaning of what God actually meant to me. And so that's why I always felt disconnected. And so instead of me trying to find that meaning, I allowed my disconnection, the feeling of being disconnected, because literally, like, we are not disconnected from God. It's like our fears and the pressure of, listening to those outside of ourselves or listening to these so called pastors. I'm not saying all of them are you know, out of the sorts, but a lot of them are very much so out of the sorts. um, but it's like listening to them and them getting on the podium. And I think like what made me really go and find, you know, my own connection and relationship to God. Like I was very intentional about that. Um, I didn't want to have a relationship with the God that was given to my ancestors or the God that was given to this world or the God that I was given as a little girl, that I grew up with. I wanted to have a connection with the source, the creator of all, the one who is at the center of everything, the one who we all call upon, but we have given different names and we choose to argue about which one is more relevant. which is funny to me. That's why I chuckle, because um, it's like reached a point in my journey to where when I hear people talking about their God, I'm just like, wow, that sounds similar to my God. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, you're saying the universe, and you're saying what the universe can give to you, or what the universe has poured into your life, and I'm like, that sounds like similar to the relationship I have with God myself, or like Source, Creator, Allah. Like, it's just like, and maybe it has something to do with where I've come from on my journey or whatever, and having that little bit of religious trauma, but also being one to not take things at face value anymore and actually question things and go and research and sit with myself and find deeper meanings to things and whatnot. But I don't know, guys. Like, I just feel like when we all sit around and we talk about God, and then we go into this new spiritual thing where we feel like, okay, God and spirituality does not exist, when in all actuality it was spirituality that was around before religion came around, right? Religion is the new spirituality, right? And so if God created everything, right? What I'm saying, if God created everything, doesn't that mean that God created spirituality, and then we are spiritual beings having a human experience, which means that everything we do here has some sort of spiritual essence to it. And it's here to help us evolve and grow as spiritual beings having a human experience, right? So I'm really grateful that my divine spiritual team and the Most High, once I set forth a very sincere and intentional intention to connect and build a relationship with the Most High myself, you know, I started watching things unfold in my life. And a lot of you might give me flack about this, but I was definitely led back to the Bible. Partly because, the Bible has something, it has a connection with my ATR, but also because I feel like when you are more intentional about getting to know God for yourself, instead of just sitting in Sunday pews and listening to the pastor tell you what the pastor received from God, or sitting in the pews, and I'm gonna just keep it real, sitting in the pews and listening to the pastor tell you lies, about what they received, knowing that they done lost their own way, but instead of admitting that to their congregation, they've fallen into the trap and the bait of being, false prophets and false teachers, just to keep their pockets full. So honestly, I agree with, you know, with Ti. I agree with Ti that the churches are businesses. We've long lost our way in the church houses where church was actually church. And where it was about truly finding connection and faith and hope and trust in God, and knowing that we are God's children, and that we're not separate from God. My own journey in relationship with God has brought me to the realization that I am God's child, and I'm not perfect, and God's okay with me not being perfect. But what God's not okay with is when I try to be perfect, or I move out of fear when God is fearless. And when I listen to fearful things and then they disrupt my energy or my connection, they block off my energy or connection with God, because God is fearless. God does not want us out here fearing anything, and even though they say, there's a part in the Bible where it says God wants you to fear God. That even has been taken out of context. God does not want you to fear it. Okay? God wants you to have humility. Yes. God wants you to move with integrity. Yes. But anything with the word fear attached to it, I think God is trying to elevate us out of that. You know what I'm saying? Um, but that's just my personal take on this whole spirituality and leaving God out of the equation when, like, literally God is the center of everything. And on my journey, I've noticed that, excuse me. On my journey, I've kind of noticed that the moments where I don't start my day tapping in with myself, excuse me, as being God's child. So me tapping in with myself is me tapping in with the God within me. So, or the goddess within me, the God goddess, I kind of just play around with the words at this point. My heart knows what it's talking about. I know what I'm talking about. And, the Most High, Mother and Father know what I'm talking about. So I just kind of play around with the words because, in a way, I guess I do it so that people can understand that it doesn't matter which word I put in place. I'm still talking about one true source. You know what I'm saying? I'm still talking about the Alpha and the Omega. You know what I'm saying? I'm talking about the one who created this world, who created these worlds and these things that we continuously travel back to and reincarnate into to evolve and to grow from. You know what I'm saying? So, and I guess I'm kind of trying to keep it not so deep because I can really go deeper than what I'm having this conversation on today. But I don't want to go extremely deep because I don't want people to miss the message. Okay. And I know, like, I'm thinking about the parables right now, and how, Yeshua spoke in parables, and the people that were meant to get what was in between the lines of the parables, they got it, and the people who weren't, they never did. So I kind of feel like I'm speaking in parables a little bit, but not speaking in parables at the same time. Because I do realize that the world has evolved from Yeshua's time. I do realize that the world has evolved from the parables, you know what I'm saying? But I do realize that still I have that philosophy spirit inside of me. And, my words just come out in parables sometimes. So you know, you get it, you don't, you don't. But yeah, I just wanted to get on here today and talk about, I really think that we should all have a seat with ourselves and really fine tune, you know, where our hearts really are with this whole spiritual journey stuff. Because we take the spiritual journey in order to escape the religious trauma. And instead of leaving the religious trauma where it's at, we leave God with the religious trauma. And I don't agree with that because I have noticed when I did that for the first couple years of my journey, I noticed that I didn't really get anywhere, and I noticed that I was led into things that and taken advantage of by things, and it felt like I just kept going in revolving doors with things and people in the spiritual community and stuff like that. And I feel like the moment that I brought God back into this journey with me and was very intentional about what type of relationship I wanted to have with God, I that's when I feel like my life started to fall apart in a more natural way in order to come together in a more natural way. And in the I was in the know, in the loop of and in the awareness of it, because a lot of us out here, because we have decided to leave God behind and tap into all of these different energies and spirits and whatnot, before we anchor ourselves in our higher self, um, which to me is like that God energy, Before we even did that, we went and tapped into all these different modalities and tools and energies and forces and entities and all this other stuff. And honestly, a lot of us was led astray. Um, with me now, I can see, like, because I've gone through it, like I've went through a space of spiritual psychosis, and that was the part of the journey where I was just tapping into a lot of stuff. But it was in the midst of that, of me tapping in with my ancestors. Like, shout out to the ancestors, because they really hunkered down on me and really surrounded me and wrapped their arms around me. You know what I'm saying? And really fought some battles on my behalf in order to help me find my way back to where I needed to be in the first place. Like, I feel like in this journey, I was just so tired of going through pain and suffering and feeling like God didn't have my back. And the whole time, God did have my back. The whole time, God did have my back in so many ways. And like the spiritual team that I have around me that was appointed to me from God, like it was just like, okay, I got to put God back at the center. And you know what is amazing about that is that when I put God back at the center of my life, and then I started putting my spiritual team around that, it was God. I put God at the center, and then I put my spiritual team. Okay? And then I put the outside world, right? And I don't know. I don't know how to really explain it, guys, because some things are just meant to be experienced and felt. So I'm doing my best to try to explain it. But literally, guys, like at the end of the day, what I'm trying to say here is you need to have a relationship with God. And I don't care what type of relationship that is, because what I've learned and seen and do see is that we all have our own relationships with God. God is experiencing itself through us all differently, but it's all a part of a greater picture. And do I say that I'm religious? No, I don't. I don't say that I'm religious. But I do say that I'm not going to leave God behind, because this new age spiritual community says that, oh, there's many gods and you can worship all the gods and this and that. And that's how y'all get fucked up. And I done seen so many of y'all get fucked up. And I'm not going to name any names because that's pointless and it's not really necessary or relevant. But I have seen and witnessed with my own eyes, a lot of y'all have gotten fucked up. Why? Because you didn't have the right people at the center of your foundation. So your foundation was bound to crumble. You have to have a center. And for me, that center is God. And I don't give a fuck about what anybody got to say. I'm not perfect. I'm still on this journey. I'm still healing. I'm still growing. But one thing I can say is I'm starting to see fruit sprout from the seeds that I've been planting and growing. And I'm starting to see shifts within my life and in myself and in even my children and even my ancestry. Okay? And it's just been too many instances since I've put God back at the center where I can sit and chill with God and talk to God and then tell God to show me yourself. Like, God, show yourself. Show yourself to me. And then something amazing will happen where it's just like, wow, like, okay. So, for example, a lot of y'all have left the Bible. Y'all want to sit and argue about the Bible. And I know the Bible's only been around for like 2,000 years, it's been rewritten time and time again. But baby, there is magic in that Bible. There is power in that Bible. I'm just saying. If it wasn't, why you think they're trying to get rid of all the Bibles? Come on now. The same people. Okay, we're not gonna get into that. You're not gonna get to that. All I'm gonna say is there is magic in that book. There is power in that book, and if you don't know how to read between the lines of that book, of course it's gonna be mundane, or you're gonna get bored, or it's gonna feel like, I don't want to read this. I don't want to, do this. I don't, there's got to be another way. And there's so many ways of connecting with God. You know what I'm saying? But for me, I realized, because of my fear of this book, because of what I grew up and seeing other adults and how they weaponize this book towards me and towards other people, and then seeing pastors do the same towards its congregation, where nobody's really growing, everybody still comes to church and tithes, and their lives are just falling apart at the seams, even more so. You know what I'm saying? While the pastors are getting richer. But what I will say is that book had me in a space of fear, and now that book has me in a space of empowerment. You know what I'm saying? Like I said, I was very intentional when I called out to God, and I was very intentional when I said, I want to have a relationship with you, one of my own. I don't want an intercessor on my behalf. I don't want, I want to have a connection with you. I want to know you for myself. Even if I'm not able to ever explain my connection with you to the world, I want to have one that is just me and you, as you being my foundation, as you being my centerfold, as you being the one, the point of all contact, you know what I'm saying, for all of me, and for my children, you know what I'm saying? And honestly, I haven't been led back to the church, because I was very clear that I wouldn't be going back to a church, because I want to build a church within my own home and space that I could communicate with you, that I could communicate with God with, and have that connection with God. And so, yeah, I feel like that's what I wanted to get off my chest today. I don't feel like my point of view on this whole matter with God versus spirituality is that God is spirituality. So you can't put a verse against God if God is the creator and source of that which you try to put against it. If that makes sense. Um Anyways, I would like to know what you guys think about it. What are your views? What are you learning on your journey in this life with God? Um Drop them in the comments. Let me know. I'm always open to hearing other people's views of and their own experiences with the Most High. This is just mine, and yeah, it took me a while to get grounded in this being my truth and my experience with the Most High, because there's a lot of people out here who try to still hunker you down and tell you that your way is the wrong way and this and that. But I feel like once you really fine tune and have that relationship with God, like, and honestly, like, if I could just let people know that, yes, the Bible was weaponized and it was used to entrap, enslave, and keep us docile and keep us, slaves to the system and stuff like that. But honestly, if you allow yourself to have a deeper connection with the Most High for yourself, and deconstruct all the religious trauma, and you ask God to take you through that book and help you build a relationship with it and help you to read between the lines and help you to find the truth that is meant for your spirit in this life, oh my gosh, things start to break, shackles start to break, chains start to drop, like, and your mind becomes so much more open. You know what I'm saying? And, I'm thinking right now about, how they try to tell us that Eve ate the apple off the tree and this and that, and then the book of, or the tree of knowledge and this and that. Like, I'm starting to really feel like, and I'm just being honest, when I read this book now with the eyes that I read it through, and with God sitting with me and my spirit team sitting with me, helping me to get through it, I'm really starting to feel like, if the Adam and Eve story was truly real and the apple was like, and she ate the apple off the tree, like, was the tree actually, a Bible? Like, because what I'm getting from this book, it's like, okay, I'm kind of starting to see why they're trying to ban all the Bibles and burn all the Bibles and this and that, because they starting to see people waking up to what this book actually holds within it. But honestly, like, I just feel like in general, whether you're on a spiritual journey or you're on a religious journey, I feel like you should get to know God for yourself outside of everybody. And if you're on a spiritual journey, I feel like, and or a religious journey, I feel like you're not meant to discard everything that you learned on your journey. So for my spiritual people, like, you're not meant to discard everything that you learned from the religious journey. There's some things that actually are a part of you learning to evolve. And y'all have gotten so mad with God that you've decided to go and worship other gods. But you don't understand that God is creator of all. So you're out here and putting your life and your lineage, and the generations to come after you at risk because you're trying to receive fast results because you're mad at the God who you think abandoned you, but you really were abandoned by the people around you who you grew up with. And instead of you going and finding a relationship with God yourself, you decided, I'm going to leave God with the people who did me wrong, and God is not real and this and that. But I just gotta be the one. I'm sorry. I gotta be the bearer of good news or bad news, whatever you want it, however you want to take it. But I just gotta be the bearer of the news that, God is very much so real. Okay. God is very much so real. And God very much so works through all of us. Um, But the only way you would think that God is not real and God doesn't work through all of us is if you don't have a relationship or connection with God and you haven't tried to have one. Because then there's that conditioning and beliefs and fears and pressures that are blocking that connection. God is openness, God is vastness, you know, and God is limitless. So if you are conditioned to think that God is evil or God doesn't exist, or you have all this hurt and this pain towards God, then it's going to make your connection harder. You know what I'm saying? To access God and for God to access you. But once you start to heal, because a lot of you in the spiritual community are going through spiritual psychosis. Like, let's just be honest. Let's just be honest. Okay. Um, But yeah, so I think that's what I wanted to get on here and share today. So if you received this message, or if you didn't receive it, or if you still feel like you want to process this message, or even if you feel like you have something that you would like to add to this message or speak upon when it comes to this message, I'm open to it. I don't take things at face value, like I said. but I know I don't know everything. I just know what I know, okay? Um, I just know what I've experienced, and I just know what I have felt on my journey and went through in order to come out of on my journey. And like I said, I can't explain all of it because some of it's just meant to be experienced and felt. But I feel like I did my best on this message. So I hope you all received it in the way that your spirit needs to receive it. Take what resonates, leave what doesn't. But yeah, go ahead and chime in the comments. I'm ready to hear what other people in the world have to say about this topic of God versus fear. I am signing out for the day.